Hello, you good people. It is Peikoff Friday. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. We are here to discuss the works of Leonard Peikoff, and we are deep in the heart of the book, Keeping It Real. And I am talking with James Valliant. James, how are you doing on this fine Friday?
I am doing splendidly. How about you?
I am outstanding. I did have a
As
schedule
always.
conflict last week, which meant I didn't have my Thursday show, and that makes me doubly excited to be able to talk to you today. And you have chosen questions from the book, as you often do, this week on the subject of career and career passion. And I am excited. I am passionate about getting into this topic with you.
So am
So
I.
I am going to jump right in because we've got just a few questions, but they go deep. They go
Okay.
real deep. And I think these are going to prove of value to you good people in the chat. Question one. Ayn Rand said that a rational man is motivated by a desire to achieve and does not compare himself to others. Can having a hero or rival inspire men to greater heights of achievement than they would reach without one? Now, I think we've talked before about the idea that in life you either create, you cooperate, or you compete. And these are all ways of achieving values depending on your interests. So it's interesting to go to this question again, or rather to this topic again. And let me just read the first part of Dr. Peikoff's very long answer. He says, well, let's take hero first. A hero is a fine thing to have, especially if you are younger, because it becomes a role model, like an embodiment of your values and inspiration. A hero is like a concretization of values, such as a course on ethics embodies, and one that you see is real. So it is very valuable for a youngster to have a hero as a role model. And then he gives a quick anecdote here. He says, by the way, I remember Ayn Rand saying that it is much better and healthier for a young person if their hero is taken from art rather than from life. She said that if your hero is someone who is intimately connected with your values, your person, what you want in life, and what you think of life, well, then if they do something immoral or disgusting or demeaning, that can be a serious wound to your idea of what you're after. You could overcome it, but she said, why put your heroism, your idealism, in the service of somebody else's free will? Pick your hero as your hero, a man who you know is what you want and will remain that way throughout. Now, that was interesting, unquote, James. This idea that listening to Dr. Bernstein, who does a show. It's not an ARCUK show, but it's pretty damn good, what he calls the hero show. And he gives examples of real life heroes in life, in history. And so reading this answer, I can't dispute the logic, and it kind of knocked my socks off that, well, if you pick a hero in real life, and this would obviously not be from history, but present day, there's a chance that person could disappoint you, and it just might knock a chip out of your sense of heroism. What did you think of that, James?
Well, I thought of my own childhood and how important heroes were to me, especially when I was young. They're still kind of important to me, but in a different way, as Ayn Rand indicates. One of my very first heroes when I was a kid, one of the very first books I ever read was a child's biography of Abraham Lincoln. And he became a hero of mine. I heard the story of how, raised in a log cabin by illiterates in dire poverty, he was essentially a self-educated man, became a highly educated attorney, a highly successful attorney, a man who was devoted to moral principle, a man of extreme ambition and rational ambition. And so I couldn't identify it in those terms, but I just knew that I admired this guy. As I got older, I learned things about Abraham Lincoln that were of an even greater heroic dimensions historically, but also put him in context. I do not agree with everything. I do not agree with his altruism. I do not agree with his racism even. So even though he was a man who freed the slaves. So here I have political and ethical disagreements with Abraham Lincoln. And so that has to change and color my opinion of Abraham Lincoln. Now, he still remains a hero to me in history, a net very positive person historically, but I have to have a qualified mixed opinion of him. And that's what reality heroes more often than not do. My dad was a hero of mine. Now, he has not disappointed me in the same sort of way, but he's not me. I don't want to be what he is. I want to be like him in certain abstract ways, but the concrete reality of that human being is not me. And that also applies to fictional heroes too. I mean, if you read about Howard Rourke, I knew when I was a teenager reading The Fountainhead, I didn't want to be an architect. I knew that wasn't it. I knew I don't think I could have had a relationship with Dominique Franken either. Not my cup of tea in terms of a human being, but until the end. But the sexy as she is, though, and compelling as she is as a character throughout to me, still I knew that she wasn't the woman for me, and that wasn't the career for me. There were certain abstract values and an image that Howard Rourke could never disappoint. You see, he would always live up. And this is, I think, what Ayn Rand is getting to. Fictional heroes are an abstraction, and the principles behind that abstraction can remain universal and always true and will never disappoint. That's what sort of makes fictional heroes superior. Now, of course, as we get older in life, heroes are a different thing altogether to us. We achieve our own values in a certain way. We develop our own earned self-esteem, hopefully. And so we should become, in effect, our own number one hero as time goes on. It's perhaps the way I would put it.
Excellent. And I love the advice. It's interesting too, because at first I thought, well, that of course I agree with the Dr. Peikoff story that he relays about Ayn Rand's perspective. And I thought, well, yeah, if you go back in history, at least you know in advance what you're going to disagree with, what their flaws would be. Whereas if you pick right now an Elon Musk or a Bill Gates, and then there's a new news headline about something that usually Gates says that is so disappointing. It really does. It takes a knock out of you, and you think, well, that's what I aspire to. But if I ever reach that point, not necessarily being a billionaire, but just that accomplished, is that going to make me make the same kinds of mistakes, even moral mistakes? But right. Choosing historical characters is a little more like choosing them out of art, because you know in advance what the flaws were. And it's interesting, if I can make one more point, that Ayn Rand offered this advice, because when I read Cyrano, for example, there's a flaw there, a kind of fatal flaw, at least in terms of the romance. And on some level, it's a moral failing. It's a failure to fully apply his own heroic view of life to the metaphysical. So what I'm saying is Ayn Rand's heroes are different in that regard. Most of the heroes out there, I want to be like them, except I don't want this or I don't want that element. Whereas I want to be exactly like Howard Rourke, not in the particulars, and we'll talk about that, but
that was
just in terms of his stature.
Unique moral ideal in her heroes that had never before been projected either by philosophers or by novelists, artists. She created a whole new moral ideal, in developing a whole new moral approach to the subject. And that is so fundamental that, Ayn Rand's heroes are incomparable to previous heroes. Although even there we can abstract from those heroes something. I can, for example, read Robert Bolt's great play Man for All Seasons about Thomas More. I totally disagree with what he went to, the mat on, what he put his life on the line for, but he was a man of principle. And I can abstract away from the particular principle, or like Antigone, the play by Sophocles. I don't agree with her religion and what she put her life on the line for, but the fact that she was willing to put her life on the line for her moral principles, we can abstract away from that and focus on the abstract qualities that make the person admirable to you, as opposed to, say, the philosophical disagreements, as differences we may have with them.
Right. So that's why I can do that in addition with people from history. I think of Thomas Jefferson, or you said Abraham Lincoln, men I have enormous admiration for. It's hard to imagine stepping into their shoes and living up to the things that they did. And yet so much could have been saved if, for example, if Jefferson had refused to strike the anti-slavery phrases from the Constitution that eventually were removed. And of course that he kept slaves himself, but it's almost a greater crime that he wasn't able to fight the South on that. and keep those clauses in. I'm going to jump right to the next paragraph in the answer here because it's irresistible. Leonard Peikoff goes on, that's why she objected, Ayn Rand. That's why she objected, for instance, to young people who wrote to her saying, well, you are my heroine. She thought it was very nice, but she also thought that you should not make your love of values and aspirations for the future depend on what she is, because, well, then if in fact she does something wrong or lies are spread about her, either way, your whole concept of a hero, yourself, and your aspirations is subverted. I would say, however, that when you get older and mature, you no longer aspire to be another. You no longer need a role model because you are playing the role of a self-sufficient individual. You have got to focus on your life and your achievement, not on asking, well, is this something my hero would approve of? For instance, in writing my current book, to take myself as an example, again, this is Leonard Peikoff speaking, it would be no risk if I submitted it to Ayn Rand and she said, well, it's great, or it's awful. Either way, she would tell me, and she'd have overwhelming reasons. But as it stands right now, I'll never know. This was written after she had passed away. It's conceivable to me, barely conceivable, but conceivable, that she would come back and say, oh, it's no good. Or she'd come back and say, yes, it's true, but it's obvious. I don't believe that, but I think it's possible. So there is a risk in saying I'm striking out on my own. I'm my own person. I don't have the safety of following my own hero. But it's an essential if you are to grow and achieve something. Now, James, you're my age, and we are young at heart, but we've been through a lot. And I suspect you feel that the same way I do, that I'm not trying to be exactly like anybody. I know what I'm trying to be, and it's Robert Nasir with a capital R and a capital N.
Boy, well said. You know, as the author of The Passion of Ayn Rand's Critics, I may have a little insight here into Ayn Rand qua hero. You know, when I first read the novels of Ayn Rand and started diving into the nonfiction, I realized that something genius was going on. And I realized she was a hero in some ways. But then I got polluted by all the critics of Ayn Rand. My mind was polluted by people who said that she didn't live up to her ideals, that she was a hypocrite, that she had all these personality flaws. People like Murray Rothbard and Barbara Brandon and then Nathaniel Brandon I knew those people personally, and they came out with books and all kinds of other stuff where they were critical of Ayn Rand. And so I had to already in my mind separate out Ayn Rand the person from Ayn Rand the work. And I thought, no matter what I learn about Ayn Rand as the person, the work is Atlas Shrugged changed my life. She did a heroic, monumental achievement, and that will never change. In doing my research, though, for The Passion of Ayn Rand's Critics, I realized that I had been misled, that I had been lied to. Exactly what Ayn Rand was worried about there. What if people spread lies about me? Or what if, in fact, I am flawed? I realized that Ayn Rand was a human being. Ayn Rand made mistakes like all of us do. She has all the same limitations that no one's infallible or omniscient, Ayn Rand insisted. And here with Leonard, she's specifically saying, I really don't like it when people make me their heroine. It shouldn't depend on my personality. And she would always say, you know, don't ask about me about personal life, read my work. That's what's important. But then I studied her personal life and I realized that in fact, whatever the errors she made in her life, and she did make some because she was a human being, she was a hero. On balance, she was the most remarkable woman I've ever heard of in my life. And so I can come around back, in effect, as a mature person and say, on balance, she's absolutely an inspirational hero. No, I'm not going to be a genius like her. No, I'm not a philosopher. No, I did not have her life. No, I don't share all of her specific values in life. But on the other hand, I can still regard her as a hero. And that image, even at the age, I'm going to be 59 in a couple of weeks, even at that age, I can say to myself, that image is still an inspiration to me. There are people I know, like Leonard Peikoff, friends in my life, like you, who are inspirations to me. That is a precious thing I'm never, ever, ever going to lose the value of. But as we get older, we realize that our life, your needs as an individual, are also objective. You have a mind and you cannot surrender it to anyone, much less a hero. Ayn Rand, is often accused of leading a cult. Absolutely the opposite is the truth. Ayn Rand did not want it to be about her personality. She did not want it to be about her. She wanted it to be about the ideas. And no greater injustice could have been done to anyone, it seems to me, than that. But she makes such a dazzling point here about herself not being your hero and the thing you model yourself on, or the truth of the philosophy hinges upon. All outstanding points. But inspiration and heroes, I think we need them our whole life to some extent.
Yes. I want to go real quick to the chat here because I want to welcome Marcelina, who is a new member of the ARC UK. Thank you so much for joining. You can become a member of the Ayn Rand Center UK. You can get access to all of the perks, including new ones that are coming up, by going to aynrandcenter.co.uk and signing up. Click membership at the top. You can sign up for as little as £10 a month, but you can also become a member of the YouTube channel. That'll give you access to a few things that are only on YouTube. Also gives you those special icons and the little stars you see by some people's comments. Those are folks who've joined up. So welcome, Marcelina, and have fun with it. We also have a super chat already, 55 Swedish krona from Free Trade, who says, how do the superheroes in popular culture today compare to Rand's heroes, ignoring the supernatural elements? That's a challenging one.
That is.
Did you want to try and answer for that, or do that after we do a couple more questions here?
Well, one thing that might be relevant is reading Ayn Rand's article, Bootleg Romanticism, where it tells you that there are all kinds of perhaps philosophically shallow heroes that are projected in certain kinds of movies and books that can still be heroes, values, even though they're not, say, the radical new vision of what a hero can be that Howard Rourke was. James Bond, he assumes conventional values, but wow, he's just cool to watch, being so darn cool and value pursuing with all the great virtues that he has. Yes. So I would put it that way. There are heroes that can still be heroes, but probably not at a philosophical level like Ayn Rand's heroes were. It's unfortunate that we don't have consistent, and philosophical heroes like you do in the highest romantic literature. But that's not going to normally happen. But heroes in literature and movies, absolutely, they're still out there. Find them. There are still even movies with real heroes in them, in my view, even if they're not philosophically original heroes like Howard Rourke is. But no, there are heroes still out there. We still need that. That's the function of art, is to give us exactly this kind of emotional experience of a concrete representation of our highest abstract values. We need that psychologically. That's the function of art.
Yes. Incidentally, since you mentioned James Bond and Free Trade is asking about superheroes, I have to comment on the current batch of superhero films, because it really seems like they're having to decide, do we make the heroes charming, which often just means make them comedians, or do we make them steely, and usually that means grim, but strong? And they can't seem to quite get it right. The closest that, when I think of that, I think of Iron Man and Robert Downey Jr.'s presentation of Iron Man, which most of the time balance those well. But I have to say that Amy and I recently saw the new Thor movie, and oh my God, what a train wreck. The best Thor movie for that balance was probably Thor Ragnarok. It was very funny, but it was never self-effacing. Right. And the latest one is it's like watching a Roger Moore Bond film, where it's just the humor is over the top and the character's halfway laughing at himself.
I hate that.
And the grim side of that was, the recent James Bond films were the flip side, sort of the DC side of James Bond, where our character is just unwaveringly grim, like Batman.
Right.
And,
well, to fight,
as much as I love the actor, he's destroyed the franchise.
Right. See, to be a real hero, you have to be grim and fight evil, and that's ugly business, and that there can be no joy or achievement in that. That's just dealing with the evil. You see, there's a terrible mind-body dichotomy, theory-practice dichotomy.
That's why so many of us love Sean Connery, especially for the early James Bond,
Amen.
where he could be both serious and charming and humorous, and never at his own expense.
That's right. Never laughed at himself as a hero. And that is a key. That is essential to me.
Yes. I want to go to the second question in the first question, because Dr. Peikoff goes on. The second question here is, can't you have a rival that inspires you to greater heights of achievement? We talked about heroes, but the questioner also asked about rivals. And Dr. Peikoff says, my answer to that would be, only if there's a practical reason for considering your rival. For instance, suppose you're in business and he's a competitor. If you ignore him, you don't realize he's bringing out a great product or beating you on the price. You have to know what he is offering right then and there, because you're competing for the same customers. You have to know. Aside from a situation like that, you certainly do not reach greater heights of achievement, as the questioner puts it, by being inspired by a rival. In achievement, you have to be entirely focused full-time on what you are doing and what you are trying to accomplish. That is a full-time mental job. This is true of all real achievement on whatever level of mind. Ayn Rand used to say, and this was true, that if she had a business appointment at 2 p.m. and she had time in the morning until 1 o'clock free, she could not write during that time. And that was because for her, her subconscious had to be totally involved, completely in control. All the premises and all the values, all of the knowledge required for the achievement had to fill her consciousness with the understanding that nothing was going to stand in the way of that and nothing was going to divert it. That is an absolute requirement of 100% achievement. Then you do exactly what the work requires. You don't even have room in that process to say, Mr. Smith wrote this great novel. What should I put in? You know, that would be out of the question. If a rival has any part in the height of achievement to which you rise, that would be the approach of a Peter Keating. And he goes on to say a rival might have a part in your marketing, he might have a part in your decision about what achievement to undertake, but a rival absolutely should not exist in the realm of achievement. And that was interesting to me, because I think of, for example, sports competitions. When it's not just enough to be good, you also have to be better than the next guy. I don't know. What do we think of that, James?
Well, I was in a profession like that for a long time. Advocacy, one lawyer versus another lawyer in court to decide the outcome of a case. There you just have a built-in rival. And the rival, there, like you say, there's a competition in effect for that. But the principle still applies. The rival is not setting the agenda for me and is not my purpose. They are not the one. It's not their rivalry that's driving me to higher heights. It's getting my case across. It's doing my job the best I can. Now, are there times when I might take notes about how my rival does, like a competitor, you see? I might take notes because, like a business competitor that Peikoff was talking about, I may take notes about how they go about their lawyering and how they present a case, because that'll show me weaknesses, openings, or maybe teach me something myself that I can use. In that sense, I'm not using them qua rival. I'm using them as an example, or a competitor in the sense that I'm finding the opening. And yeah, the task is to beat not the other guy, but to get the truth across. I never looked at it in trial advocacy as a competition with the other lawyer. I looked at it as a quest for the truth. And if the truth is what you're after, if justice is what you're after, then the rival is only sort of part of the mechanism. He's not my purpose. He's not what I'm focused on. I'm focused on what I want to accomplish, getting the truth across so that we can do justice here.
Yes.
So even in a competitive field, even when you're striving to beat the other guy, the rival really isn't the focus. It's beating myself, doing the best I can, getting my message across. That still has to be my primary focus, always.
Excellent. I think what I immediately jumped to, sports competitions, was what confused me. And then I realized, well, in a sports competition, your rival isn't the same as an antagonist. He's not the bad guy. In a way, he's almost like a hero that you are striving to surpass. You don't look at him and say, I've got to be better than him because what he's doing is a bad thing.
Right. See, a rival can be a hero in a different context. It's
Yeah.
absolute. That's a really great point. But besides, who we're really in competition with is us. My
Yeah.
last performance is what I'm in competition with, doing better and better for myself. And that can only measure against me. There's no one else who's even a comparable yardstick who can be any useful comparison to me. So it's of no use to compare myself. See, I was a young lawyer and I'd see some brilliant trial lawyer out there doing just some job I knew I was not yet able to do. I would look up to it. I'd admire it. I would take notes from it, but that's not going to be me any more than the person who I thought was a dishonest lawyer and pulling tricks and, playing mental games felt in the jury. Those were negative examples to me. But in neither case was that the yardstick I use to measure my self-esteem, my purpose. No, that's got to be me.
Excellent. Yeah, I love it when Gail Winan says to Howard Rourke, you made a mistake on the Stoddard Temple, Howard. That statue should not have been of Dominique, but of you. And Rourke says, no, I'm too egotistical for that.
I love that.
And Winan says, egotistical, and egotistical would have loved it. You use words in the strangest ways. And Howard Rourke answers him in the exact way. I don't wish to be a symbol of anything. I'm only myself. I love that. And I love the 3 C's, which I often have to bring into conversation because some people in this philosophy and just in general associate competition with capitalism. And I love that capitalism starts with a C because I can immediately make the point. There are 3 elements of capitalism. And I think competition is arguably the least important of the 3. The first is creation. The second is cooperation, meaning not altruism, but just the division of labor.
Exactly.
Think of economies of scale. And the third one is competition, that ability to look at other people and say, oh, yeah, that could be done better. I need to rise to the challenge. So I love that perspective because being a little more of a Howard Rourke personality, between creation, cooperation, and competition, I'm always creation. Creation is primary. So yes, I am in a race with myself.
Exactly correct. Cooperation and competition they're equal in my view, but they must be subordinate to the creation element. And that stuff can only come from you, your purpose, your motive, your rationality.
Excellent. Well, that takes us right into the second question. Can you believe it's only the second question? But you only gave us a few this time because you knew we would go long. What is the root of ambition and passion? How did Rourke's ambition and passion originate from rationality? Well, that's interesting that they right away say, well, it must have started with rationality. So Leonard Peikoff, and this one we could talk about for hours. Leonard Peikoff says he had to have intelligence, an active mind. He had to be in a situation in which there was enough knowledge to make that choice possible. He couldn't have made it in a pre-industrial age, certainly not in the form he did. He had to have a certain kind of temperament. He would not have been happy being a philosopher, which is, unquote, funny to hear Leonard Peikoff saying that because Leonard Peikoff's a philosopher. Continuing on, he wanted contact with the physical. He would not have been happy being a contractor. He wanted the intellectual, artistic component. Now, whether you call that temperament or a basic approach, you need all that developed from your rationality. And then within that framework, if you've got all that, well, it's a matter of focus, direction. That may at the outset be accidental. In other words, it may be that the first thing Rourke focused on, the first thing that hit him was spatial structure or spatial organization. And then he pursued that. It struck him. He saw something and he went on and grew, whereas most artists would undoubtedly have heard only a few notes, so to speak. He himself was fascinated by that and pursued that. And I think the main issue is that there are an unlimited number of aspects of reality you could focus on. If you are tabula rasa, career-wise, you're a blank slate, you're intelligent, and the general cultural knowledge is there, well, you have a category of what you want, and you're looking, and then a million things could hit you. If you pursue that focus you started with as a child, it could end up as a passion and ambition in that field. That's interesting to me because, and I've said this before, there's a sort of anti-rationalism principle that I have, which I call some but any. There are many categories in life where, for example, the amount of ambition. What's the objectivist amount of ambition to have? And the answer is you've got to have some, but it could be any within a reasonable range. And I love that Leonard Peikoff said, well, you start with what you focus on and then what captures your interest, and then you develop that, and then other things come along. In other words, he's giving an anti-rationalist answer. Leonard Peikoff, who has, humorously referred to himself as a former rationalist. I love that his answer is so grounded. And for anybody out there who has these kinds of questions, yeah, first thing I would say is, well, look at reality, look at your life, look at your own passions.
Well, objectivism as a philosophy stresses as the three central values that everyone really needs: reason, purpose, and self-esteem. So philosophy can tell us that we need a central purpose in life. It can tell us that we need the effect of pursuing that self-esteem as well. It can tell us how we have to approach it, reason. But the application of that is infinite. There are more things in this world that I can possibly even explore. But what's objective for me, what is my objective purpose, what would give me the greatest self-esteem, that has to be, and it's still just as objective as those universal principles that apply to everybody, but it's objective for me because of my context. The answer has to come autobiographically. The answer has to come from the concretes of your experience, your life, the things that got you interested in something, your values. And it will be different for everyone. Howard Roark, for example, he needed that artistic expression. He needed it to be physical too. There are all these wonderful scenes where it really shows that about Howard Roark. He wouldn't have been happy as a philosopher or a novelist like Ayn Rand or Leonard Peikoff, who would not have. Ayn Rand, she had the kind of mind she did. She had the kind of childhood experience she did. That's going to turn her into Ayn Rand, along with all that free will and thinking that she does as a young person. Similarly with Leonard Peikoff. I have experiences with injustice as a young person, and a couple of them really left deep impressions on me about injustice. I have experiences with heroes, the justice that's owed to certain people that is denied them. That left a deep impression on me. And so justice became an important aspect, a value to me, so that I could return back to it and say, that's what I want to pursue. That's what I want to pursue in life. And then when I check it out, when I try it a little bit, hey, I'm good at this. I'm better at this than I would be, say, at being a medical doctor. I know that right away. I know that's not going to be the thing that I'm going to be getting into and enjoying and therefore getting good at. That's the kind of concrete autobiographical way in which you have to find out what motivates you, what drives you. And only by doing it, by checking out different things, can you really even begin to know what it is that you really do enjoy doing, in fact, what gives you that feedback loop, that says, this is the purpose, this is my purpose, and this is what gives me self-esteem, and this is what gives meaning to my life. Also on the negative side, we could say about philosophy, philosophy can tell you altruism and mysticism will screw you up. If you pursue your career to do what will be good for humanity, or what your mother, like Peter Keating, what your mother expects of you, or what will impress your friends because you're a social metaphysician. If any of that altruism, collectivism enters into your mind, obviously you're never going to find your driving passion in life. You're never going to find the thing that makes you intensely happy like Howard Roark, and you'll end up like Peter Keating, who should have been an artist, but was driven to something else because of social metaphysics and altruism. Same with mysticism. If you're not grounded in this world, if you realize your purpose is none other than living this life and enjoying it, as opposed to some supernatural dimension, that will screw you up. But within those broad categories that philosophy can offer us, really it's a unique thing to each of us, still an objective thing, but a unique thing to each one of us that has to be found. And there's no substitute for actually figuring out what it is you enjoy, what it is you like doing. And to know that, you got to start doing things. Yeah, that's not for me. That's not for me. I knew this amazing woman once who got her Juris Doctorate in law, got a graduate degree in law, started to become a lawyer, said, yeah, that's not for me. She went back to school, got her PhD in clinical psychology. I mean, that's the kind of, now, many people aren't going to be that, long-term and change career paths and do that kind of a long-term thing. But that's what we have to be willing to do. We have to check it out. Is this for me? Is this what I want to do? And be able to change based on our values when we discover that about ourselves.
It's a surprising number of writers in Hollywood, especially of legal dramas. You look them up and yeah, they were lawyers. And they got their law degree, practiced for a while, and decided they wanted to be writers instead.
I have to tell you this. Half the people that I went to law school with didn't know what the heck they were doing. A lawyer sounded like a practical field. Their parents told, oh, yeah, that's a good practical field. You make plenty of money. Oh, that's a good thing to be. We all want a lawyer in the family. Oh, lawyer, isn't that the default position? And it seemed to me like half of my colleagues in law school did not have any driving purpose or ambition to be lawyers at all. It was just sort of the default thing. Be a lawyer. That was a formula, and I could see it, a formula for misery, unhappiness, and eventual career changes for many.
Yeah, well, speaking of people who apparently did know what they wanted from day one, we have a super chat from Jonathan Honig, former floor trader on the Chicago Board of Trade, founding member of Capitalist Pig Hedge Fund. Of course, a host of some of the best episodes, including today's TDO. That was interesting. The Daily Objective today, I saw the title of that Jonathan Honig was going to discuss political campaign slogans. I thought that didn't sound very interesting. And it was so good. He made it such a good episode.
He is so brilliant.
He is. And, he's the founder of a hedge fund. Who would have thought that he would turn out to be an Ayn Rand Center UK intellectual, including also being the editor behind A New Textbook of Americanism. Ayn Rand wrote the pamphlet, Textbook of Americanism, way back in her days working in Hollywood. And Jonathan Honig took that work, created an anthology out of it, A New Textbook of Americanism, The Politics of Ayn Rand. Of course, he's released his own book, Price is Primary. So, Jonathan, thank you for the super chat. And Kathleen is also in the super chat with £5. And she asks, are Federer's retirement speech and nod to his competitors was a wonderfully gracious example of the spirit of competition and advancement. Now, I have not heard Roger Federer's retirement speech, a Swiss tennis player, but I will give that a listen. Thank you, Kathleen, very much, both for the super chat and the recommendation.
I caught a piece of it yesterday on the news, and I cannot agree with her more.
Outstanding. And before I jump back into the questions, we just got a super chat from Jeff Bannister, always a very generous supporter from Canada, or at least he contributes in Canadian dollars very generously, and said, I read The Secret. Seems everything is accomplished by the law of attraction and vision boards. Any thought? I do have thoughts on that, and we should do those before we wrap. But I wonder if we should do that right now or not. I'm just going to read the last bit of the answer to our question number 2 here. Leonard Peikoff says, I think the main issue is that there are an unlimited number of aspects of reality you could focus on. And then at the end, he says, could Rourke have been fulfilled by any other careers by the same process? And Leonard Peikoff says, well, I think so, within limits. I won't say what they are, simply because there's nothing in reality or rationality that mandates this. It's his choice, his fascination. I don't see any reason why, if another aspect of reality struck him and was within the basic framework of what he was looking for. I mean, the union of thought and action. Well, I don't see why he couldn't have gone elsewhere within limits. Maybe some kind of engineering or some kind of inventor, but it's hard to even imagine that because we think of him so obviously as an architect. Now, unquote, that's the end of Leonard's answer to question 2 there, but it kind of brings back that idea of, well, we look at heroes like Howard Rourke in fiction. I want to be Howard Rourke. Well, except I don't want to dye my hair orange. I don't want to be an architect. I don't want to work in maybe a quarry would be fun. But yes, it's not about the particulars. It's about the abstractions. It's
Exactly.
about the virtues, and especially the three values, as you mentioned: reason, purpose, self-esteem.
Right. Now, I know you have thoughts on what Jeff just said.
It's funny because the secret is taking something that we all already knew and wrapping it up in woo for people who aren't all that rational, or people who live as much by their feelings as their thoughts. We all know that if you want to achieve greatness, then you have got to have a single-handed focus. We read so many books, and to some extent, you see this in Ayn Rand's writing. People, for example, who forego romance because they are so singularly focused on their passion. For anybody who's seen the film Whiplash, that is explicit in that movie because our main character, Miles Teller's character, is pursuing being a jazz drummer. And that's not like being a rock and roll drummer. This is constant practice, blood on your hands, practice level.
And a ruthless teacher.
and the movie intentionally brings in a brief, charming romance by somebody who seems like she might have actually been a good person for him to be with.
Right.
But at that stage of his life, at those early years, if he was going to be at that level, and we see that in The Fountainhead. People, well, did Howard Rourke have any romances before he met Dominique? We get a taste of that from the early Ayn Rand and the story of Vesta Dunning, but even there, it was not important to Howard Rourke at that stage of his life. So the point is that if you want to achieve greatness, if you want to achieve anything that's beyond the day-to-day, you need incredible concentration, a certain focus. And what we know in the coaching community is that means you've got to allow these things to be in your mind all the time. So as little bits of reality come at you, little clues about how to achieve it, or little opportunities that you can capitalize on it, you're there for it. In that sense, yes, the law of attraction, that's nonsense, but you do need to have that single-handed focus. And yes, once you do that, things will happen that seem like more than coincidence, but they're really not.
They're not. Reason is one of those three central values, and rationality is numero uno in the list of virtues. We cannot, and this applies to introspection and our own life at least as much as anything else. We think of rationality as, figuring out the physical world around us and doing mathematical calculations on how to build a bridge or do my taxes or something. No. Look in and use the same rigorous rationality about yourself, your psychology, your values, your experience, what moves you. Reason applied to yourself, an inward look at what drives and motivates you, is absolutely essential here. You're never going to have a driving passion or purpose in life if you're not comfortable looking in and evaluating the inventory of your own experiences, understanding what your values are, the hierarchy of your values are, and living some experience, going out there doing it, and then introspecting. What's making me happy? What's exciting me? What do I enjoy doing? It requires the application of reason to your own psychology and experience, the application of reason to an inward introspective glance. That's what's key here.
Yes. Chris Smith in the chat says, quotes Joseph Campbell, "Follow your bliss." And then he says, Campbell said, "and then follow your blisters," meaning look at it.
Right.
And I think that's the case, that a lot of people who follow this recipe for success, none of this is happening by accident. They're not stumbling into success. They are putting forth both rational action and extraordinary effort to pursue their values. It's unfortunate that they don't think of it in those terms. Right. And so you'll get people who said, yes, I followed my heart and I never let up. Well, what that really meant was you had an extraordinary value and you refused not to take the action it took to achieve it. As you say, introspection should have been a bigger part of this for more people, but unfortunately it's still early days of objectivism, and people aren't always self-reporting in a way that makes it clear that they didn't get lucky. No, there was an extraordinary amount of rational action that got them where they were going.
Absolutely. It's never an accident. It's purposeful, rational action. And people will take for granted those introspective elements, I think, far too lightly. They'll treat them. They're not. They're critical. They're critical to having an intense, passionate life. You've got to be comfortable introspecting and saying, what excites me? What thrills me? What is it that's motivating me? What gets me out of bed every day? That's boring. And know that about yourself. Know thyself, as the Greeks said. That's the key to living a passionate life.
Yes. Well, as a lawyer, you know that self-reported data can be suspect from people who aren't great introspectors. So I'm going to jump to the third question, because this gives us the flip side. You know, it seems like Jeff's question gets us to, well, there are people out there who do great things, and because they had this great passion. Well, no, it's because they had great values. What about people who don't? So question number 3 is, how can I develop a driving career passion if I don't have one and I really want one? Well, this is a question that comes up a lot. I think a lot of us have asked this question. You discover Ayn Rand, and if you're not already in the midst of an enormous passion, you think, yeah, I want to be like Howard Rourke, but I have no idea. Nothing's really, I don't have that architecture thing in my life. So Leonard Peikoff answers, I'm often asked that. No surprise there. Because people admire Howard Rourke from the Fountainhead, and they sincerely want to be like him in that regard. They admire that kind of life, but can't find that kind of career passion in themselves. This is a psychological question, not philosophical, but I'll try to give you some of the points some people find helpful. And he says, first of all, this is a very common problem. It's not restricted to objectivism. How do you find something you really want and feel a passion for if you pursue it? Now, you should read some non-objectivist books on that. I'm sure the internet will bring up a million. One that used to be good, but I don't know if it's still around or has been superseded, is, what color is your parachute? I'll break the quote for a second there and say, no, it is still around. And this one's a few years old, and this was the 2013 edition. So what color is your parachute is still a good book for people who aren't sure where they're at in their career. It's especially good if you're already in a job and you're not sure you should stay, but you're not sure how to leave.
Right.
Back to Leonard Peikoff's answer, what color is your parachute? It's got all kinds of forms and questions to help you identify what your interests are. And that's the value of a book like this, are the exercises. You're like, oh, that sounds like work. I just want to read. No, do the work. Trust me, it's worth it. Okay, back to Leonard Peikoff's answer. The main thing is to find your interests. Now, interests are not yet passion. They're not yet even necessarily a desire to pursue. But try to find something, anything, no matter how small, that might reveal what you like, even if it's fairly weak. For example, when I was young, I didn't know what to do. I knew I liked to ask certain kinds of questions pertaining to right and wrong. I had no idea what philosophy was. I thought that might be an area of interest, but it was no more than that. I liked the big bands, and I was taking the piano, so that was something as well. I liked reading fiction. I had a few things like that, but nothing that would give me a clue to being the basis for a career. Look back then to your childhood and your teenage years and try to pick out anything that you were interested in doing, interested in watching, whatever. Try to find some spark to go on. By the same token, look for the things you hated or were bored with. List them so you'll know what's no good and you'll stay away from them. And then he goes into vocational tests, and that kind of takes you in the same direction as what color is your parachute. These are useful, more than you might think, for helping to sort that out. Okay, back to Leonard Peikoff. If you can delimit that, and you're in one whole area somewhere, as opposed to another whole area, well, you can then ask, well, what you'd like to do with your free time. Even if you just say you like taking vacations, ask, well, what kind of vacation? What interests you about that kind of vacation? What do you most enjoy doing on that vacation? You try to specify just to get little green lights. Once you've got as many as you can scrape together and you've organized them in one area or whatever field you think includes the most of them, you have to try and name what careers some of them might have possibilities in, correlated with each interest. You try to think of careers you could imagine if your interest could be blown up. I'm going to skip forward a little bit here because here we go. Assuming all the practical side is out of the way and you're down to 2 or 3 possibilities, then pick one arbitrarily. If you can't find any difference, plunge into it, even if only because the subway ride to one job is shorter than the other. That's not much more arbitrary than that. Make a 1-year commitment. Decide that no matter what you find, you're going to stay there for a year, because every job seems bad or good at the beginning. You can't tell anything for a year. You may very well find what a lot of people find, namely that they go into something with a little interest, and then they start to do efficacious work, even creative work or intelligent work. Then they get self-esteem. They get pleasure out of that. And after a year, they really are interested in the work. A little bit later, he says, well, if that doesn't happen, try it on another job and then another. And that gets back to the principle of some but any, or Andrew Bernstein's explorer premise. We so much want to look at a book, find that answer, and then go out and do the perfect thing. And I love that Leonard Peikoff gives this whole exploration of values and then says, try it and see. Ayn Rand is not going to tell you, well, I need to go work for, IBM Corporation or Burger King, or the specific answer. At some point, you've got to get out there and try things.
Even after I decided I wanted to be a lawyer, justice was it for me. I love arguing. I'm good at arguing. I'm going to be an arguer because I'm super loquacious and love it. And I'm all about justice. But that's just a general field. I clerked at a very big law firm in downtown LA, O'Melody and Myers. Big law firm downtown LA. I went up in an elevator with Henry Kissinger. One of the partners there was Warren Christopher, Clinton's Secretary of State. This was a high-end law firm. I was just a clerk, though, of course, a law student. And they had me doing, you remember the asbestos litigation, thousands of expert depositions where they would do testimony from literally thousands of experts on a certain subject with a lawsuit, because the insurance companies were all involved in this multi-billion-dollar class action lawsuit. And I realized I wanted nothing to do with that aspect of law. Doing deposition digests for other lawyers, doing legal motions, doing all this negotiation, all this behind the scenes. That is not the kind of lawyer I wanted to be, even though there's all kinds of prestige and money there. So I said, no, that's not the kind of lawyer I'm going to be. I want to go be the guy in court pointing the finger and getting the guy in jail and doing justice and saying, that's the bad guy. I wanted to have that feedback right there. I want the excitement of battle in court. So then I decided, if necessary, I will go be a deputy district attorney at the local level. I loved that work. I was excited every day I got there, and more excited, because I loved doing justice and getting that feedback and being in court every day and arguing. And even a broad field like law, what you have to do is try out different parts of it, see what parts of it, even though the money and the prestige may be really great over here, I just say, that's not for me. I don't care what the money and the prestige is over there. I'm not going to do it. They offered me a job. I said, no, I'm going to go do this because I love this work. That's what you have to do. Get out there, do it. Then introspect, look in. What's giving you the pleasure? What are you motivated by? What's giving you the self-esteem? And that'll develop a passion. Promise.
Excellent. And we have another super chat from Bonnie, who is always an outstanding supporter and one of my favorite people in the chat. And she asks, what part of the book is this section? Great show. Thank you for that, Bonnie. It's the very first part of the book, starting on page 1. And we went through questions go up to about page 19. You'll find them all right in the beginning there. Outstanding. I said before, as far as my little bits of professional advice I offer, if you've never quit your job, you're not getting paid what you're worth. Now, this was especially true in the IT field, my field. If you have never gone to your boss and said, I've got a better offer somewhere, A, he's not paying you what you're worth, and B, even if you have to leave to get it, there's better money out there. But it turns out, as I've learned, it's not just about the money. If you've never left anywhere, it's very possible you've never actually found what you would most enjoy doing. So yeah, get out in the world and try things and make mistakes.
You've had an amazing background of different jobs. You really have. I have too, to a certain extent. I worked in a factory, a machine shop, a bookstore, all before I decided, yeah, okay, this is, I'm going to be a lawyer for sure now. There's no substitute for getting out there, trying different things, different jobs, seeing what you like, you don't like, the aspects of those jobs you like and you don't like, because that'll help you focus and hone that passion, that driving central purpose, which all of us need.
Yeah, how would you have known? You might have abstracted it, but how would you have, it may have turned out that working at a bookstore with the sense I'm surrounded by these books and I'm bringing people to literature and this is what I want to be doing all day. That could have been it.
But it was, and I got a chance to read books and sell books and work with books, and still, as much as I loved reading and books, it still was not my central purpose.
Or it could have been the factory job, and I have my hands on things. I feel connected to the earth and this life, and it's visceral. And
oh, I loved that, because what I'd do is even in the factory, I'd ask, what is the role? Because I'm just on an assembly line. And so you could get lost in I'm just doing one rote thing over and over and over. No. What does this thing do? And what is my role in this? And understanding my role in the larger thing and understanding the importance of the thing I'm making gave it life. So now I wanted to be perfect. I wanted it not only to work perfectly, but look sharp and beautiful. And suddenly I'm devoted even to this, what might be considered a boring, repetitive task. Suddenly I'm now driven. Even in that context, I was motivated, just not as motivated.
Yes. So yeah, by all means, I would agree with everything that we have read from Dr. Peikoff and the related questions that Bonnie is going to find in that first section, and tell people, yes, get out there and explore. And if you've never made a mistake, then you've probably never done the right thing either, because you're not pushing your boundaries. You're not pushing the limits. You're not seeing everything that is open to you in this amazing world of opportunity that we have out there. Well, excellent questions this week, and we're near the top of the hour, so I think it's a good time to wrap up. Thank you to everybody in the Super Chat who has contributed. As I say, your Super Chats support the Ayn Rand Center UK, which, if you're not already a member, you know what to do, aynrandcenter.co.uk, and sign up, become a member. The perks are outstanding, but the organization itself is well worth supporting. And James, thank you for another outstanding conversation. I look forward to going over the notes I made for this episode, because it's got me thinking twice about a few things that I'm doing. I know we're considering, for example, changing our schedule a little bit. Right. I've got new ideas for things that are coming up. Right. And it's making me think, I don't want to get too comfortable. I want to keep pushing my own limits and make sure I'm really doing what I want to do. I hope this discussion has compelled everybody else to do that too.
Yeah, that is the lesson here. I am a work in progress. I don't care if I live to be 110, I will still be a work in progress. And that's part of having a driving purpose and passion in life. It never ends. It never ends. There's always something of joy to do. Yeah.
I'm tempted to say, James, you couldn't be any better, but in a way that would be an insult. I'll bet you too.
I'm perfect and getting better, Robert, every day.
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us. This has been another episode of Peikoff Fridays. We look forward to doing it again next week. Now, there might be a slight schedule change between now and then. If there is, we will keep you informed of that. But we are far from done with this book, and we will never be done with going over the admirable works of Leonard Peikoff. So we look forward to having you join us next time. James, thank you so much for everything.
Thank you, Robert. My God, it is always enjoyable to have a conversation with you. You are always full of insight. And all I can do is repeat what you said. Ladies and gentlemen, if you find this content of value, if you find the work that we're doing at Ayn Rand Center UK of value, creating a worldwide community of objectivists, spreading these ideas and making them accessible to everyone, especially young people, then do please consider becoming a regular subscriber to Ayn Rand Center UK. This work is important, and I can think of nothing of greater value.
Outstanding. Everybody, James, all of you out there, have an outstanding weekend, and we will see you next week.
Take care.